Right, so today we've had the plant order in. So we've got all our stuff from Denele Plants. So we're finally going to fill the planted tank up, get everything planted. There's a few more I need to get, a few more plants I need to get to put in here. But we've got all the carpeting stuff, and I wanted to get the moss on first because you've got to glue it on. So we'll plant the tank today and see how it looks when we fill it up, and then we can start adding our sort of long stem plants at the back once the tank's filled up. So what I will say is, I usually, when I've planted tanks, I'll usually get the Tropica pots. It's the first time that I've ordered from Denele Plants or Denele Plants, and I'll just show you. So look, the pots are absolutely crammed. So when you get them from Tropica, there's a lot of space in the top, there's a lot of gaps and air. These are absolutely crammed full. So all I've got is a load of pots of the hair grass. So we're going to plant all that, because ideally what I want is just a lawn of hair grass, and then a load of moss on the roots and the branches, and then just a couple of stem plants at the back. So we'll start planting these, get them all in little sort of bunches dotted around the scape. And then first of all, we'll put our moss on because we need to glue it on the roots as well. So there's loads of different types of mosses, and they come in different shades and sort of shapes and sizes. They grow in different ways. But the one we've gone for on this one is Christmas moss. So I've got about 5 tubs of these, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use super glue and attach it to the wood. You want to do this first, because once you put water in the tank, you can tie it on with thread and tie it to the branches, but I just think the super glue works a lot better. It bonds on, and you can't visually see the thread wrapped around it, which is sort of compacting it to the branch. So I prefer the super glue method. It's the best way to do it, and it's effective as well. So like I've already said, I've never used the Denele plants before, but usually when you're opening moss, they have like a sort of jelly around the bottom, like a nutrient jelly, what feeds them while they're in this pots. I don't know if Denele do this as well, but Tropica do. So sometimes you've got to wash it off before you can start attaching the moss into the tank. So we'll have a quick look. Yeah, so you can see it on there. It's like a nutrient jelly, what they use when they grow them in these vitro pots, and you've got to wash it off because it's a bit minging, and then you want your glue to bond with it as well. And then what we can do is we can start opening it up into little pieces and attaching it onto the wood with the super glue. Right, so we've started putting the moss on now. We've got it all cleaned off. We've glued a little bit into the crevices. So what moss is really good for is filling in your little gaps, your little blank sort of corners and obvious sort of things on your scape. So we use the gluing method. Make sure your scape's damp, because what it will do is, if it's wet, it acts as like an accelerant on the glue. So it just helps it bond quicker if you're doing it on a damp surface. So you just get yourself a little line of moss like this, and then we'll just put a generous dosing of gel super glue. Make sure you're using the gel one, don't get the runny stuff because it won't work. And then you just sort of put it into your little crevices where you want it, push it in, and then that super glue should bond fairly quickly. And then it gives the moss an anchor. So this is why we're doing this first, is because once we fill it up, unless you're tying the moss to the branches, which is impossible to do in these little crevices anyway, you can only really tie it onto the actual bark. I just think the super glue method's better. So plan ahead, make sure you do the moss first and glue it in that way, and you'll get a better result out of it. Right, and there you go. That's the finished product of gluing all the moss. Now obviously this moss will grow and spread, it won't just stay as it is, so we'll get a really thick growth and it'll look really natural and overgrown when it really starts setting in. But what we'll do now, we'll obviously get these and start planting the hair grass in little bunches, and then it should look like a semi-finished product once we've got all these plants in. Now the hair grass, I mean, these are absolutely cram-packed, so you'd be surprised how much real estate these actually take up in the tank. So just have a look and see if these have got the no, so similar, these won't have the sort of jelly nutrient base on them. So all you have to do with these is unfold them. So unfold them, try not to damage the roots when you're doing it. Be very gentle with it when you're unfolding it all. And then what we do is, once we've got it off, we'll tear off tiny little sprigs, and then we'll stamp them all in uniformly, spread out a little bit, but we'll try and fill it in as much as we can with what we've got. And then the carpet should take off. So we can see we can roll this out like that, and then we'll just start tearing little bunches off with the roots, and then we can start planting them. Now one thing you have to have when you're doing this is these. So trying to do this without is an impossible task. The ones with the curve on the bottom are usually better for planting with, but the ones I had are broke, so I'm stuck using these ones. But we'll just dip them in, try and bury them as much as we can, leave a bit of the top sticking out. And then we've got quite a lot of this, so we should be able to do them fairly close together. But I mean, you can space them out as much as you want, they will eventually grow in. Right, so we've got the first layer of carpet plants down at the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is fill the tank so that the water level comes up to where we've got the raised bits at the back, so where we've built the scape coming up to give it a bit of depth. We'll fill the water line up a little bit more so that we can start planting there. It's a lot easier to plant when there's just a little bit of water sort of covering the soil. So we'll fill it up and then we'll crack on a bit. Right, so that was very painful. So if you've never planted carpeting plants before, it is a very tedious process. It's not very enjoyable and it takes a very long time, but we've done it. What I'm going to do now is set up the canister filter. So what I have done with this is I've took all the media out of it into these bags and I put them in the sump on the African cichlid tank. So this has been cooking in that sump for about 4 or 5 weeks, so it should be fairly mature. It should give this tank a good boost, a good start with the nitrogen cycle. So we'll set up the canister filler, get things turning over, and then we'll get the final shots of it once we've done that. Right, so this tank's been up and running for a week now. It's doing fairly well, but there has been a couple of hiccups with it. So you might have noticed we've taken the mounted LED off and gone with the hood of the tank. The reason being is the mounted LED, I don't think it was getting enough light down into the bottom of the tank. and there was quite a lot spilling out into the room. So I've just put the hood back on, but the problem I had was my bogwood was sticking up quite far away from the surface. So I caused a bit of an issue with the tank meddling with it. So what I've done is I've had to saw the top of the bogwood off. And in the process of doing that, what I've done is I've loosened all the bonds to the stones on the glue, which was weighing the bogwood down. So it started floating up. I've lost one of the branches on the right hand side of the tank, so it's looking quite bare there now, but we can solve that quite easily by just putting some stem plants, bigger growing plants in there just to fill that gap out. But I've had to place a rock on the branch here, which is bugging me a little bit because it sticks out. But I've got a feeling if I place some plants correctly in the right spaces, we can either blend that rock in, or once this wood becomes waterlogged and actually sinks in the tank, we should be able to remove that stone without the wood floating up. So a couple of bumps in the road in the first week, but it's pretty stable now. I've got the CO2 hooked up, so this diffuser, in all honesty, isn't that great. But what I had to do is I lost the diffuser that I had previously. So I had to get one fairly quick. So I ordered this one really quickly. I've got a better one coming. It's doing the trick, but it's not got... The bubbles that it's releasing aren't very fine. It's not the greatest one. And if I turn the CO2 up any higher, those bubbles become relatively big. And they're not diffusing properly into the water. So I have to keep the CO2 on quite low. But all in all, the tank's doing all right. I think once everything starts growing in and settling down, then it'll start to look really good. The gaps I've got at the back, I'm going to get some plants this weekend and start filling it in. And then it should start to look more like a finished result.